I'd like to talk about the film and television industry for a minute. You know, as you and I have discussed before, we are a production center. We are a backlot for Hollywood North. It's kind of in similar fashion to what we were talking about with silicon hyphenates in the technology industry. Vancouver is a place to go to shoot. You know, we're in the same time zone. We have an 80-cent dollar. We provide tax incentives to come and film here. But production is only one small part of the industry, which goes from finance and development through production, marketing, and distribution. Can you comment on the importance of being able to participate in the overall industry, especially from the ownership of the intellectual property and the implications of that?
That's the most important part. It's the most lucrative part of the industry. We know that out of Los Angeles, for example, the most valuable export are film and television royalties, right? We want a part of that, right? Because otherwise, it's just the downstream impacts of that we're getting here, right? It's the film and television industry, production industry supports a lot of jobs and supports a lot of value add, right? In terms of the indirect and induced economic contributions, right? Fiscal and job and output, et cetera. But when the most lucrative part goes back to Los Angeles and keeps paying coupons on that, right? When everyone watches a movie or a television show, we're losing out completely on that. So we have to figure out a way to support more of that IP-driven part of the industry, right? The facets of the industry. And I think we're seeing more of that with, you know, more interactive digital media here, and a lot of firms that have maybe been fomented out of our more traditional film and television production industry, because there is a lot of talent here and that are growing, but we really have to support that part of the industry. But because that's where the real proverbial economic bang for the buck is, right? It's not in just being a production center, because frankly, when you think about it, are we any different than maybe what Shenzhen is to iPhones, right? Supports, you know, hundreds of thousands of jobs building the iPhone in Shenzhen, but all the royalties go back to Cupertino.
Right.
Do we just want to be that in film and television? And then it also becomes a race to the bottom, because you're, of course, dependent on a very lucrative film and television tax credit. We know that there are many others popping up, right? And so do you make it more lucrative as, you know, Montreal makes their interactive digital media tax credit more lucrative, as Louisiana grows theirs, as, you know, Georgia grows theirs, as the UK grows theirs. And you see these production facilities popping up all over the world, right? And frankly, I think that that market is saturated, right? You're seeing these huge film production facilities in Ireland and outside of London, outside of New Orleans, in LA, of course, in New York, and now even in some tertiary locations, right?
Yep.
So it's becoming diffuse, right? A lot of this production is going on all over the place, right? And eventually, we're going to see content development pull back. We already are, right? We saw Netflix's earnings and everything else. They have been profligate spenders over the last, you know, 5-8 years, and especially during the pandemic. And now they're starting to pull back because their earnings haven't supported that. So they're going to pull back their costs. So a lot of that production spend will probably go away. So if you don't own the IP and you're only building your industry on the production, poof, right?
I've been trying to get this point across for the last 20 years, and unsuccessfully, unfortunately, which is why I got out of the film and television industry, because I would argue that we're the creative industry's equivalent to hewers of wood and drawers of water. And we really do need to own the intellectual property, or at least participate in it.
Yeah.
But that's not something the city can do anything about. The city, again, is 115 square kilometers, and it has limitations on what it can do, and it's tied to the land. So from an economic standpoint, as we look at our industrial future, the future economy, it really does come down to land use from my perspective. So when I look at an industry like film and television, it comes down to where. Where do we shoot? Where do we park the trucks? Where do we get our power? Can we have police and controls on it, as opposed to jumping on a plane and going to Los Angeles or going to Cannes or anything like that.